Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Analyst Inside Cricket. This is a preview of the IPL, which starts, the 14th edition of which starts this weekend. And we have a very special VIP guest today on the podcast. We have Manoj Badale, the lead owner, of course, of the Rajasthan Royals and co-author of the book, which if you're watching on video, you can see a little symbol of it behind us, A New Innings, which we wrote back in I suppose 2019 and 2020, really, and eventually it came to fruition after the pandemic had hit, and we had to kind of slightly rewrite it, and it came out just before the last edition of the tournament, September last year. And interestingly, Manoj, A New Innings, it's still relevant, really. Many of the stuff that we refer to, things like the unpredictable outcomes, the way that the last tournament, for instance, went to the last ball or the last over many of the games, the fact that the tournament in September and October was in the balance for most of it. And, there was like a few points separating top and bottom until the last week of the tournament, the digital explosion that we talk about in the book, private investment and the influence of that. Growing the tournament generally. Although the tournament has been fascinating throughout, one team has been quite dominant of late.
So I guess if the question is, does the Mumbai Indians' success confound the notion that we describe in the book, which is the success of the league is based on unpredictable outcomes? I don't think it does at all. I mean, as the team that finished bottom last year, we played Mumbai Indians. We've beaten them 4 out of 4 times. In our last 4 meetings. So I think the beauty of the IPL, which we touch on in the book, is the design of the league and the fact that at the very essence of that design was a focus on creating a level playing field. And as you and I know both passionately believe, the essence of sport is unpredictable outcomes. Fans want to see competitive matches, and that's one of the core reasons why the IPL has been such a success.
What's the most surprising thing for you? The fact that you're still heavily involved in this tournament 13 or 14 years after inception.
Yeah.
Secondly, the fact that it's been so phenomenally successful. Or thirdly, that a book that you and I have written has been nominated for an award, the Cricket Society and MCC Book of the Year for this year.
Definitely the latter. The notion that you and I could do anything together, let alone produce a book. But look, you know better than anyone, the objective of writing that book. That was a sort of 10-year project that started. It was a sort of personal cathartic experience to deal with the trials and tribulations, because I tell you, staying in the tournament for 13 years has not been straightforward. We've been terminated, we've been suspended, we've had spot fixing scandals, we've had pretty much every controversy the game can throw at you. So I wanted to create a record of that, and it was only when you gripped it with me a couple of years ago, and we came up with that notion of trying to unpack the business insights behind cricket, and I think it became readable. And you said in your introduction that it feels relevant now. I think it's incredibly relevant now. I mean, the pandemic has shone a spotlight on the economics of sport in a way where I just don't think it's ever been discussed by sports fans. Whether it's cricket, soccer, rugby, whatever your sporting preference is, understanding now the business of sport has become mainstream. And I remember, I think it was 2.5 years ago when you and I talked about packaging the stories in a way where we unpack the business of cricket. I remember Googling the business of cricket and the business of sport, and the only thing you could get were books on sort of hospitality management. So I think sport and the business of sport has become mainstream. And in terms of your actual question about which of those three are the most surprising, they're all surprising. I mean, it's very easy to be smart with hindsight, but no one envisaged the IPL becoming as big a global property as it has. And I certainly didn't predict the challenges we would have at sort of simply staying in the tournament.
And, as far as the success of it goes,
last edition, for instance, the one that was delayed by the pandemic, ad revenue up 20%, audience figures up 25%, sponsorship through the roof, just the narratives every day spinning off matches and finishes and performances. It has been astonishingly successful, actually. Given all the hurdles that it's had to overcome. Is that just basically because of the excellent design of it, or is it? No. Is there some other kind of sort of lucky reasons in a way?
Yeah, there's always. I mean, actually, the first thing I'd say is, there's a presentation I used to give many years ago about the successful company syndrome, and while the IPL and the word success typically go in the same sentence at the moment, success can quickly change, and circumstances can change. So, I've always argued that big companies and industries, in fact, are often at their most vulnerable when they're at their most successful, because you get complacent, you stop innovating, you stop experimenting, and you get a little bit lazy. And so while the IPL is deemed to be a success, that can change very quickly, and it's really important that everyone involved in the tournament really does continue to innovate and experiment. Otherwise, others will catch up, or existential crises like coronavirus, which no one predicted, can really challenge it. But look, there were a number of reasons behind why the IPL worked. One you've referred to a couple of times already, which was the sort of brilliance of the design of the league and that focus on a level playing field, and the things that went into that, like the player auction, etc. Two was the integration of celebrity with sport. So non-cricket fans in India were as captivated as cricket fans through the presence of Bollywood. But as ever, you need a little bit of luck as well. And India winning the first World T20 World Cup, in South Africa in the last over against Pakistan in front of 1 billion people, that's a pretty good launch pad. You also had a cadre of Indian greats who were all sort of retiring or coming to the end of their careers at the same time. So you had 4 or 5 megastars like Tendulkar, Sehwag, Ganguly, Lakshman, Dravid to sort of build the tournament on the back of. T20 was on the rise, and India, had never really had a chance to watch much T20. So look, there were a number of things that went for the tournament, as well as some sort of brilliance in its design. But the BCCI, have to take the lion's share of the credibility for moving at extraordinary pace to pull it off.
And I suppose the other thing is, one other little thing is just the rapid expansion of the Indian middle classes and the availability of low-cost data for phones, meaning that you can access the footage or data about the tournament, any detail you want, very easily and very cheaply now in India. Something like 700 million smartphone handsets, or there will be soon. So that development has been interesting. I just put a graphic up behind me there just to illustrate the amazing unpredictability of the tournament. Although, as I said, Mumbai Indians have won it 4 times now. You can just see from those lines behind me the other teams that have also been part of it. Obviously, the Royals winning it that first season, and then dropping down to sort of 4th and 5th spot, and other teams coming through. If I move my head, you can see the different the sort of undulations of the different teams' fortunes during those 14 years.
I'd rather you kept your head where it is, because it actually blocked out the 2-year gap when we were suspended. But back to your Mumbai Indians point again, they have been without question the form team of the last 5 or 6 years, and all the other franchises have to acknowledge that they've done a number of things right. I mean, early on in the tournament, we had the badge as the team that were the most sophisticated and advanced in terms of its use of data and its ability to unearth young Indian talent. I think you have to be objective now and say Mumbai Indians have probably surpassed us on both of those, in the sense that if you look at the recent India T20 side, and you look at the current Mumbai Indians lineup, I think of the 7 Indians that play, pretty much all of them now have represented India in the short form of the game, and quite a few of those players were brought into the IPL by Mumbai Indians. So their scouting network and their coaching infrastructure, and their ability to get talent in India has helped them. Their financial backing has definitely helped them. But actually, if you look at their win rate over the 13 years, it's not that different to Chennai Super Kings, and it's not that different to 4 or 5 of the other teams, ourselves included. So yes, they've won the tournaments, but I think what that's demonstrated is an ability to win the very big games. But if you look at their points per dollar, and if you look at their win rate percentage, actually we don't do so badly.
On the playing front, few changes at the Royals. Kumar Sangakkara has come in as director of cricket. You've got rid of Steve Smith as captain, and he's gone to Delhi Capitals. Also, a big purchase of Chris Morris for something like $2 million. I think a record-breaking amount for an overseas player. And obviously also no Jofra Archer for the first few weeks, which clearly is not the Royals' fault. But those changes, can you explain them?
Yeah, I mean, take them one by one. I mean, the last couple of years have probably, from a cricketing perspective, been the most frustrating for me personally, because they've been the first 2 tournaments where I've really gone into the tournament believing that we had a squad that was capable of certainly competing for the playoffs, if not kind of, making it to the final. And yet we finished 7th and 8th. And so fundamentally, I don't believe we have a playing 11 problem, but there's clearly something that we haven't quite got right in terms of the overall sort of leadership structure, etc. And it's a complex. I mean, you've been out to many IPLs, and it's a complex environment to lead and manage in, because you've got this fusion of nationalities, you've got this coming together of 30 odd sort of players and coaches, where you have to get them to gel in a very short period of time, and you've got personalities where you've got 18-year-old Indian kids who have never been in a dressing room with players of the stature of a Ben Stokes or a Steve Smith, and then you've got internationals who've got multiple competing priorities. So it is a very complex managerial task. So we've taken a bit of a step back and said, actually, we want to look at why we were so successful in the sort of Rahul Dravid era, when we had a very clear director of cricket, we had a very clear sort of structure, and so we try to bring some of that. We don't have a head coach this year, which is going to be a challenge, and we have a brand new captain. The decision to let go of, as opposed to get rid of, which I think was your phrase, Steve Smith, was a difficult one, because Steve's been with the franchise for 6-7 years now, and has been a huge part of the IPL of the Royals, and has been an extraordinary captain. That was much more to do with the playing balance, which is, you've got 4 internationals. You really need to be using 2 of those in to strengthen your bowling, and particularly your quick bowling if you can, unless you've got a world-class spinner like Rashid Khan. And we didn't do that last year. We had 3 of our 4 internationals batting in the top 4, which just changes the balance, and that really exposed the weakness of some of or the inexperience of some of our fast bowling. So the Smith decision was about balance. That's meant we've had to try an untested captain, Sanju Samson, but he's been with the Royals since he was 17 years old, so he knows what we stand for, and we think he's someone that can be back for an extended period of time. The Jofra Archer issue, I think was unexpected but expected, in the sense that when we went into the auction this year, if you look at the overseas players we bought, they were all overseas quicks, because that's where you have the greatest risk of injury, and that's where you need the greatest optionality. So everyone's talked about Chris Morris, but we're as excited with the signing of Mustafa Zia, who's got an outstanding IPL record. And everyone forgets we've got Andrew Ty in the squad as well. So hopefully our insurance planning in the fast bowling department pays off. And Chris Morris, again, people forget, but we brought him to the IPL. We know him very well. He was with the Royals for 3 or 4 years during that very successful period under Rahul Dravid. He only ended up at Delhi because so much of our backbone went to Delhi when Rahul Dravid and Paddy Upton and Zubin Bharucha went there while we were suspended. And of course, Delhi have become a real force on the back of that, because they bought players like Rishabh Pant and Shreyas Iyer, who right now would be Royals if we hadn't been suspended.
How difficult a tournament is it now that it's played A, behind closed doors, and B, not at home venues? And none of the teams, I think, are playing at home. Your Royals' first 4 or 5 games are at Mumbai and then to Delhi. So what impact does that have?
I don't know if we know yet. Sort of playing behind closed doors is obviously something all of the cricketers have got used to now. So I don't think there's any. Look, it's the same for both sides. So I don't think there's any excuses there. It clearly loses some of that IPL magic of, Indian crowds, which you know better than anyone. So you can't pretend it's the same. But what I think the Middle East tournament showed was just how compelling a TV product the IPL is. The number of people who said to me, it's the best sport you can watch on TV that doesn't have fans. So as
long as it doesn't last too long, actually. And that's the one problem is, dragging on longer than 4 hours, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I actually agree with you. I think the whole overrate issue and time of a match needs to be looked at. And that's one of many examples I can give you where, we mustn't get complacent as a tournament. We've got to keep refining and keep iterating. But when you're so successful and everyone keeps telling you you're successful, it's hard to critique yourself. But that's one of many things that I'd love to see change. But look, it's not the same. But you've just got to keep reminding yourself it's a huge privilege that for the cricketers it's tough, right? They're in these bubbles, but you sort of have to remind them and remind ourselves that it's a huge privilege to be able to get out and play a sport that you love and get paid lots of money for doing it at a time when young kids are locked down. And right now, by the way, the coronavirus crisis that we talked about in the book, and as you know, all the proceeds from the sale of A New Innings go to the British Asian Trust Coronavirus Appeal. Actually, the narrative about coronavirus in India in the past 4 or 5 months has been, gosh, it hasn't really affected India. But actually, right now, it is ripping through India, and it's the single biggest risk for the tournament right now. In Maharashtra and now up in Delhi and Bangalore, the case numbers are exponentially rising, and pretty much every squad in the IPL has already been affected, either off-field or amongst their coaching staff. So that is going to be the big challenge this year, not the lack of fans. It's actually keeping the teams in the bubbles.
And what's the contingency for that?
I don't think you can have one, Simon, because if the players get it, how do you then, if it gets into the bubbles, it's very hard to have a contingency. You can, they had the option of playing it again in the Middle East, and I think based on where case numbers were 2 or 3 months ago, they've decided to bring it to India. They've tried to reduce risk by reducing the number of venues, but even the complexity of 4 venues, 8 teams, 64 games, it's the one thing keeping me awake at night.